Wow, good morning. I want to thank USIP for hosting us in this terrific venue and all of you for joining us this morning. Many of you know that IIE is marking its centennial this year, so history really matters. And I went back to look at the first time we conducted a census of international students. It was actually within 6 months of our founding. And in 1920, the top 5 sending countries then are still in the top 10 sending countries today. So one of the things it tells me is that international education and America as a destination has something that has persisted over a full 100 years. A couple of other things struck me from our history. One is that if you look at the list in the 1920s of sending countries, it's very global. It looks exactly like the list today. Every region, every country thinks of international education and America synonymously. Countries use international educational exchange to jumpstart their national development programs, to advance their own internationalization strategies, and to open new relations in their relations with the United States. When I taught at Georgetown, we had in America 10 students from Vietnam. When Marie was at Georgetown doing her MBA, that number had grown to 100. I think neither of us would have imagined today that it's the 6th largest sending country with nearly 25,000 students in the United States. So it opened a chapter in relationships, and it actually added a lot to our understanding and moving beyond the experience of the Vietnam War. 50 years ago, we were fortunate enough to begin to have a series of grants from the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs at the Department of State. That enabled us to deepen our analysis of the data we were collecting, to widen the scope so that it became really a full national survey, the results of which you will hear today. And now it is my privilege to invite the Assistant Secretary of that Bureau that supported us long ago and today, Marie Royce.
Well, thank you, Ellen, for that kind introduction. And good morning, and welcome to the launch of International Education Week and the 2019 Open Doors Report. Thank you all for joining us for these 2 major milestones in education. And it's a pleasure to see many of our colleagues from the government, media, exchanges, and higher education communities. We also have some students from the George Washington University in the audience too. Please let me know where you are. Thank you, students. Appreciate you coming. And I'd like to also thank Dr. Alan Goodman and the Institute of International Education, known as IIE, for sponsoring this event and for their efforts to help launch this year's report. IIE collects, analyzes, and publishes the Open Doors data each year. And I want to say thank you to Deputy Assistant Secretary Edward Romatowski. Can you please stand up? Das Romatowski is of the State Department's Bureau of Consular Affairs. Your presence today and your longtime support are very much appreciated. As Ellen noted, this year marks the 70th anniversary of the Open Doors Report, which has been funded by the U.S. Department of State since 1972. When Open Doors started in the 1948-49 academic year, there were just 25,000 international students in the United States. Since then, the Open Doors Report has become indispensable for government, private sector entities, and higher education institutions for their critical data and insights in international student mobility. In addition, as we noted, we have 2 milestones. In addition to the Open Doors report, it's an honor today to kick off the 20th annual International Education Week. Throughout this week, the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Department of Education, as well as schools, universities, and communities across the country and around the world, will promote the importance of international education. Now, please turn your attention to a special message from our U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos.
Hello, I'm Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. I'm pleased to join the State Department in marking International Education Week. Each year, we highlight its benefits. International education was of great benefit to me. Travels behind the Iron Curtain as a high school student through Czechoslovakia and East Germany, and as a college student spending several days in East Germany. These experiences are etched in my memory. They come to mind especially this year, as we celebrate 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall and winning the Cold War. When America's students are prepared to engage with others around the world, America wins. Global and cultural competencies are developed and honed over a lifelong learning journey. Students need the freedom and flexibility to decide each step of that journey. That's why our Education Freedom Scholarships proposal is so important. It fuels states and local communities to develop more opportunities for their students. For instance, not long ago, I visited students in remote Alaska who could use Education Freedom Scholarships to revitalize the study and mastery of Native American languages. Scholarships could also be used for students who want to study topics not offered in their school buildings. Our proposal unleashes countless not yet imagined ways for students to learn. Ultimately, we believe students of all ages should be free to find their education fit, because freedom is for everyone, everywhere. It's not just an American thing, it's a human thing. So let's use International Education Week as an opportunity to embrace education freedom for all students.
Okay. So when international students and American students meet in classrooms, laboratories, athletic fields, and in campus clubs, they establish lifelong connections. These exchanges lead to increased trade, scientific collaboration, and the values of liberty, democracy, and the rule of law. So today, I'm pleased to share that for the 4th year in a row, more than 1 million international students are studying in the United States. Great. Students from around the world are drawn to the United States because of the excellence, diversity, and academic freedom of our public and private education institutions. Beyond that, international students contributed nearly $45 billion to the U.S. economy and supported over 455,000 U.S. jobs. And importantly, international students bring diverse perspectives to our campuses, classrooms, and also to our communities, especially to the 90% of American students who do not study abroad before graduating. And while the United States remains the top destination for international students, we know that international students also have more choices than ever before about where to pursue higher education. The United States has the knowledge, skills, and capacity to maintain and to expand upon our status as the country of choice for students from all around the world. In fact, international students comprise only 5.5% of overall U.S. higher education enrollments. And with more than 4,700 accredited colleges and universities, we have significant capacity to host many more students from all over the world. We also know that 70% of foreign students in the United States study at only 200 institutions, with 1 out of 3 studying in either Texas, California, or New York. We want to see more international students studying at a larger number of our colleges and universities all across the United States. And now, a short video clip to underscore how much the United States values international student mobility at the highest level.
We're the greatest university system in the world, and we're going to keep it that way. And one of the reasons it's great is we have a lot of students from China. Now, we're not going to make it tough. We're going to make it like for everybody else.
Mr. President,
Okay?
any potential for rescinding the
We're
current...
going to make it, I think that's important. I think, Steve, I think it's very important, Bob. Our universities are available. The world comes in, they use our universities. We have the greatest system in the world. And China's not going to be treated any differently. I think it's important for you to say that to the people of China. Our system is open. People get in based on merit. We have incredible talent coming in from China. They occupy a big space in our universities, and we want to keep it that way. Okay? Because there was false rumors going on that we're going to close the schools to China. That is so false. It's just false.
Mr. President, any chance of...
Answering OPT.
Some technical issue we have already exchanged our opinion
You've already exchanged, yes.
with
There were reports about canceling of OPT for
One
all foreign
second.
students.
Mr. President, I think you've been very clear in your directive all along through the trade negotiations on your view on the universities. and
Are you going
we
to
will-
do
we
anything
will
to
follow.
reassure the students?
Yeah, I can give them my word. I want them coming here. We want the greatest talent in the world coming to our great universities. To Harvard, Yale, Princeton, the great Wharton School of Finance, to Stanford, all of these great schools, we want them coming here. And that's what we have. That's one of the reasons we have the great system.
That's great. As President Trump makes clear, the United States strongly welcomes international students from all over the world. And at this point, I'd like to welcome an outstanding student who will speak to us about the benefits of international education. Lara Ante recently completed her LLM in Human Rights Law at Notre Dame University in Indiana. Lara received support from Education USA under our Opportunity Funds program. Lara, please join me. Thank you. Let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Laura Ante, and it's an honor for me to be here this morning. This is my opportunity to thank you directly, members of the Department of the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs and the Institute of International Education for programs such as the Martin Luther King Jr. Fellowship, the Study of the United States Institute for Student Leaders, and the Opportunity Funds Program, a life-changing experience. With that being said, please allow me to introduce myself properly. I was born along the Pacific coast of Colombia in the town of Buenaventura, known for its beautiful landscape and for being the main seaport of my country. It is also known as one of the regions that suffered the most during the long armed conflict, struggling with the presence of more than 10 different armed groups, horrific violence, and crushing poverty. However, what is not as well known, but a very important characteristic that identifies this region of Colombia is the strength and resilience of its people, of whom 95% are Afro-descendants, and our natural inclination to be real peace builders, even in the face of extreme challenges to overcome our struggles. My people see the value of education and have dedicated themselves to acquiring an education no matter what it takes, even with the absence of high-quality institutions so that we can break the cycle of poverty and overcome the scourge of violence. What I can tell you about me is that I have in me the strength and resilience that is characteristic of my community. However, this alone is not what brought me here. My journey started with the Martin Luther King Jr. Fellowship for Afro-Descendant and Indigenous Students, sponsored by the U.S. Embassy in Bogota. With this program, I learned not only English in 1 year and 3 months, but I created a family that is extended throughout Colombia and the world. Then, Susie Billon gave me the opportunity to come to the US and attend courses at St. Bonaventure University, gave me a dream. The dream of coming back to study here and enrich my academic background in order to contribute with a career to the benefit of my region. Finally, I was selected for the Opportunity Funds program, and there I met Juanita Rodriguez, my Education USA advisor. She was very supportive and believed in me even when I doubted my process. Even though I was in Buenaventura and there were not many institutions that taught English as a second language, she bought me the books and set aside time to help me in order to master the TOEFL. It was not easy. It entailed a huge effort from my advisor and also trust. I learned what I could do by myself and what hard work and determination could achieve. After getting a good score on the TOEFL, things started to change. I received a fellowship to do a LLM from the Racial Discrimination Watch of Colombia. That is a group of lawyers that fight against racial discrimination to attain racial justice. Then I applied to UCLA and Notre Dame. Both accepted me and granted me fellowships. My advisors, Juanita and Rachel Wilson, were more than excited. They stood by me, encouraged me, and helped me through this process. As for me, I was shocked. I decided to ultimately attend Notre Dame because of its Institute of International Peace Study that was following in real time the implementation of the peace accords. I did research with the Professor David Corwright, that is the director of the Peace Accord Matrix. I wrote under his supervision a paper giving a regional perspective of the armed conflict and how the implementation of the rural reform could reduce poverty, violence, and the illicit crops in the Pacific region of Colombia. After graduating last May, I received a fellowship from the University of Notre Dame with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, where I have been able to work on cases of gross violation of human rights in countries across the region, including Colombia. As you already know, being a human rights lawyer has become a high-risk activity in Colombia, especially for Black women who have been victims of violence for demanding the rights that should be granted to us by birth. Through my work at the Commission, I believe I am having a great impact in the lives of those victims that have never been heard or never known justice, truth, and reparations. Furthermore, my mere presence here gives me the opportunity to show that women with similar backgrounds, such as mine, can reach their goals with determination and the sense that when one makes it, all of us make it too. I know that there are thousands of Black women in Colombia as a whole waiting for opportunities like the one I have had, thanks to the Department of State and Opportunity Funds program. Opportunities for quality education idealized and built by all of you. These programs have the capacity to reach the most abandoned places in the world and give people hope. Despite status quo and fight inequality are invaluable, and also give us the chance to be our own leaders and trailblazers, which ensures that all what we learn is passed on to future generations. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. That was so impressive. We know that young people like you, Laura, are our future leaders, and we must help prepare them to understand global perspectives, respond to new priorities, and build diverse relationships. That's why the Trump administration is allocating more funds than ever before to support international student mobility. The department's Education USA network is comprised of over 435 advising centers in 180 countries. To promote study in the United States, we are doubling our advising presence in Canada, adding advising staff in East Africa, the Indo-Pacific, and Latin America and the Caribbean. And we recently opened a new advising center in the Bahamas. Thank you, Des. Education USA works on behalf of all accredited U.S. higher education institutions. Its basic services are free to students as well as American colleges and universities. This year, we've enhanced our global outreach to international students, to parents, and high school counselors to discuss cost-effective strategies for study in the United States. We are actively promoting the benefits of the 2+2 model, which combines study at a community college and a four-year college or university. We want every student to know that there are quality U.S. institutions at all price points. Over the last year, Education USA has expanded its outreach to U.S. institutions to share best practices for recruiting and hosting international students. Participating institutions include U.S. community colleges, minority-serving institutions, and private liberal arts colleges. We are also engaging in key markets like China, India, Colombia, and Brazil. Through print, TV, and radio interviews, we are reinforcing the message that we welcome international students. In India, we've created a virtual Education USA advising app to allow students to connect to our Education USA advisors. And we are currently working on a high-quality global marketing campaign to better promote study in the United States. And I'm pleased to say that on the outbound side, U.S. study abroad plays a crucial role in international student mobility. In academic year 2017, more than 341,000 American students studied abroad for academic credit. That's an increase of 2.7% over the prior year. We're so happy to see from the Open Doors data that American students are going to a wider array of destinations worldwide. Almost half of the American students studying abroad for credit are studying science, technology, engineering, math, and business. And we're so pleased to say that the department sends more than 7,000 American students abroad each year through the U.S. Fulbright Student Program, the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship Program, and the Critical Language Scholarship Program. So in conclusion, as we talk about the open door numbers, both inbound and also outbound, remember that each of the 1.4 million students from America and around the world has a very powerful story to tell. And each of them is now better prepared to make a more positive, powerful impact around the world. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Alan Goodman of IIE, who will tell us more about the 2019 Open Doors report. Thank you to each of you for coming.
Marie and Lauda, thank you so very, very much, and thanks for all the department and embassies and Education USA are doing abroad. It is the front lines of getting the message out. Let me say a few words about how we're going to proceed this morning. I will introduce our team of researchers, Mirka Martel, Julie Baer, and Peggy Blumenthal. Mirka will talk about the inflow of students to America and the trends she's seeing. Julie about Americans studying abroad, and Peggy about global trends from Project Atlas. Now, Mirka came here as an international student. In anticipation of a question we'll get from the audience, she came here in the 2nd grade. We don't track primary school enrollments, otherwise I would have given her the cover of Open Doors from 1989. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mirka Martel.
Thank you, Alan, and good morning, everyone. I will begin my overview of Open Doors 2019 with a look at data on international students coming to the United States. Now, as Assistant Secretary Royce already mentioned, this year we celebrate 70 years of the Open Doors publication, which provides the most comprehensive and historic analysis of international student trends into the United States. Since the first publication in 1949, then called Education for One World, we have been grateful for the support provided by the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. higher education community. On the 20th anniversary of International Education Week, we reflect on the important role that Open Doors plays in this event each year, opening up the week-long series of events. Now, Open Doors benefits from the consistent, robust responses we receive each year from higher education institutions around the country. With institutions represented in every state, public and private, and community colleges, each year Open Doors surveys over 2,800 higher education institutions that host international students. We have institutions who have reported for every year in the past 70 years, a testament to the importance of this data to the U.S. higher education community and the world. So now on to the data for 2018-2019. As already mentioned, for the 4th year in a row, the total number of international students in the United States exceeded 1 million, with an increase of 0.05%. Looking back at 70 years of Open Doors, the increase of international student flows has been significant. As a comparison, in 1949, the total number of international students in the United States was 25,464. Over the past 10 years, the number of international students in the U.S. has nearly doubled. While we have seen a slowing of this growth in the past 4 years, the U.S. remains the #1 host of international students around the world. Total enrollment numbers show a mixed picture. We continue to see an increase in students on optional practical training, or OPT, an increase of approximately 10%. OPT is a great opportunity for students to gain practical work experience in their field of study after their degree program, ranging from 12 months to up to 36 months for STEM majors. Enrollments at all other levels, undergraduate, graduate, and non-degree, decreased by 2%. It is important to note that the decreases in total enrollments are primarily due to the decreases we have seen in new enrollments in the past 3 years. As these new students become sophomores, juniors, seniors, and eventually as larger classes graduate, enrollment numbers may be affected by the lower numbers of students cycling through the system. We are seeing a better picture in international students enrolling for the first time at a U.S. institution, which are a subset of total enrollments. Last year, new enrollments declined by almost 7%. This year, new enrollments declined by approximately 1%. So we are seeing an improvement of this trend. This is likely due to the extensive efforts that U.S. higher education institutions are making to attract and welcome international students to their campuses. This year, international students came to the United States from over 200 places of origin. The top 3 places of origin of international students in the U.S. remain China, India, and South Korea. China and India make up over 52% of the total international student population in the United States. As we include the top 25 places of origin, we begin to see inflows of international students from other regions, including Latin America, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Over the past 20 years, increases in Chinese and Indian students in the United States have been driven not only by enrollment increases, but particularly options for OPT. The number of Chinese students grew by almost 2% and continues to be the leading place of origin with over 369,000 students. Numbers of Chinese students grew at the undergraduate, graduate, and OPT levels. For the first time, the total number of Indian students in the United States surpassed 200,000. The number of Indian students increased by approximately 3% and included an increase in undergraduate enrollments, non-degree, and OPT. South Korean numbers continued to decrease for the 8th year at 4%, driven primarily by demographic shifts and growing capacity of the higher education sector in South Korea. Now, if we take the last 10 years, we have seen positive increases in a number of emerging market economies across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. For example, this year we saw international students from Brazil increase by 10%, from Nigeria by 6%, and from Bangladesh by 10%. Brazil has rebounded from the decreases we saw in 2015-2016 due to the end of their major government scholarship program, the Brazil Scientific Mobility Program. More U.S. higher education institutions are expanding their outreach to more regions, especially by leveraging the Education USA network. And this growth demonstrates how attractive education at U.S. institutions is for students from around the world. International students contribute to globalizing U.S. campuses, classrooms, and communities. Across the United States, institutions are actively promoting their campuses as welcome destinations for international students. California, New York, and Texas continue to be the top 3 destinations for international students. As we include more states, we see that international students are hosted in every region across the country. Now, international students make up 5.5% of all U.S. students in higher education, close to 20 million. There continues to be substantial capacity for campuses to host more international students. We find that 16 states have higher than average concentration of international students, particularly states in the Northeast and the Midwest. Next, let me share some data on fields of study. As in previous years, most international students, approximately 52%, study in STEM fields, primarily engineering and math and computer science. While 1 in every 5 students majored in engineering, the overall number of engineering students fell by 1% in 2018-19. The number of international students studying math and computer science grew by a robust 9% this year, moving to the number 2 field of study behind engineering. Conversely, we saw a decline of approximately 7% in international students studying business and management. International students in the social sciences increased by 1%. Further analysis shows that the composition of majors by place of origin varies. While China and India continue to concentrate in the STEM fields, Going back to the 4 emerging market economies I spoke about previously, we find that these economies have a more diverse proportion of fields of study. This may point to the need to further diversify fields of study as we focus on more places of origin. International students are major contributors to the U.S. economy. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, international students contributed $44.7 billion to the U.S. economy in 2018. Further, according to NAFSA, over 458,000 jobs were created or supported by international students in 2018-19. Over half of international students contributed non-U.S. funding, and particularly personal funds, to fund their education. This number is particularly high for undergraduate students who often finance their own education. And now to findings that we have as of this fall, 2019. The 2019 Fall Snapshot Survey provides a timely look at current patterns in international student enrollment as of fall 2019. 10 partnering higher education associations distributed the survey in late September and early October to their member institutions across the US. Over 500 higher education institutions responded. The findings of the 2019 Fall Snapshot Survey align with those of Open Doors 2019. In the 2019 Fall Snapshot, new enrollments declined by 0.9%. This represents a further stabilization of the large decreases we saw in previous years and indicates that new enrollments are improving. New enrollments varied by institutional characteristics and geographic regions. While doctoral universities reported an increase in new enrollment, master's institutions and colleges and universities in the Midwest and South reported decreases. Outreach to Chinese students continues to be a main priority for U.S. higher education institutions. Institutions prioritize international student outreach to China, Vietnam, and India. 59% of institutions reported focusing recruitment efforts on international students already in the U.S., including international high school students and those attending community colleges. There are many best practices that can be learned from institutions that continue to experience increases. These institutions reported that they were able to grow their new enrollments by increasing recruitment efforts, conducting more active outreach to admitted students, and growing the reputation and visibility of their institution abroad. Among institutions with fewer newly enrolled students, the vast majority, or 95%, attributed a decrease to multiple factors. The fall 2019 declines in new enrollment were due to perceived problems with student decisions to enroll in another country, the U.S. social and political climate, and visa delays and denials. Finally, the findings also indicate a diversification of strategies for higher education institutions. Institutions are leveraging the knowledge of current international students on campus, the Education USA network, alumni, and agents to build recruitment pipelines. With that, we want to thank the organizations and associations, many of whom are here today, that play a key role in Open Doors and the Snapshot Survey, helping us with survey distribution, advising us on survey design, and promoting Open Doors and the Snapshot Survey. Thank you very much. I will now turn it over to Julie Baer, who will be speaking on trends for U.S. students studying abroad.
All right. Thank you so much, Mirka. And I want to thank everyone here who is joining us in the auditorium, as well as those who are tuning into our global live stream for your dedication and support of international education. I'm pleased to be presenting this morning on the Open Doors key findings for U.S. students studying abroad. But before delving into the data, I do want to start by highlighting the story of Open Doors data on U.S. study abroad and how it shows the growth within the field over time. Over the past 65 years, we've adapted our survey techniques to collect and provide the field with the most comprehensive information. So we moved from directly surveying overseas colleges and universities to our current format of working with US higher education institutions on both for-credit study abroad as well as comprehensive non-credit study abroad. Now, we've made these changes in an effort to expand and deepen our knowledge and really create the most complete picture of US study abroad. So with that, where are we now? In the 2017-18 academic year, we've continued to see growth in the number of US students studying abroad, bringing the number up to nearly 342,000 students. Now, I do want to note that this information is 1 year behind the data Mirka just presented on international students, and so it is really looking at the 2017-18 academic year. And the reason for this time lag is due to the time it takes students to go abroad, come back home, and be awarded academic credit. Now, here we have compiled a full 20 years of data on US study abroad for academic credit. So what have we noted? Well, first of all, I find this to be a remarkable trend line. The number of students pursuing study abroad for academic credit has increased for nearly every year over the past 2 decades. And in fact, when we look at the numbers specifically, we see that the number of students studying abroad has tripled. We've grown from nearly 114,000 students up to that number of over 341,000. So as we look at this growth, though, we see that much of it is driven by short-term study abroad, which are abroad experiences of 8 weeks or less during the academic year or for a summer term. Now, this is likely due to colleges and universities expanding opportunities to a more diverse group of students who may not have otherwise been able to study abroad. Now, among students going abroad, Europe continues to be the predominant destination, with over half of all study abroad students going to Europe. But in an effort to better understand how study abroad to various world regions has grown, we've compiled a snapshot of the number of study abroad students 10 years ago in blue, and our most recent 2017-18 year in red. Now, we can clearly see that Europe hosts the most US study abroad students, but what stands out to me are that many of the other world regions have experienced faster growth. So let's zoom in and take a look at that. The number of students going to Asia increased by over 30%. Sub-Saharan Africa was up by 52%, and most notably, we saw an 80% growth in the number of students pursuing study abroad in multiple destinations, which means that an increasing number of students have had the opportunity to study abroad in more than one cultural context. Now, when we take a step back to look at the map of full destinations, we can see that US students travel across the world to gain a global perspective. As of 2017-18, institutions report students studying in over 180 different destinations. So I wanted to go back in time, though, for a comparison. When we first reported full data on US study abroad destinations, students were only reported as traveling to about 128 destinations. So we have seen an increasing interest in studying abroad across the world. Now, I want to focus in on the top 14 destinations that have over 5,000 students studying abroad. These 14 destinations host about 62% of US students going abroad. And I will note that the top 4 destinations, the UK, Italy, and Spain, which host over 30,000 students, as well as France, have been the top destinations since we began the survey in the 1980s. Now, when we look at this percent change over the past year, the majority of these destinations did experience increases. In Europe, Italy, Spain, France, Ireland, Czech Republic, and Greece all increased. Now, particularly notable is that 20% growth in study abroad to Greece, which has seen 2 consecutive years of 20% growth. The leading 2 destinations in Latin America and the Caribbean, Costa Rica and Mexico, both increased by about 4%. And then I do also want to highlight Japan, which has seen 7 consecutive years of growth in study abroad. I now want to turn to look at the characteristics of US students studying abroad, such as students' fields of study, their racial and ethnic profile, as well as gender. Now, the proportion of students majoring in the STEM fields has increased to about 26%. And we have seen considerable growth in the number of students studying abroad from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups, increasing from about 18% a decade ago to 30%. And women do continue to comprise about 2/3 of study abroad students. Now, while the profile of US students studying abroad continues to diversify, there continues to be room for improvement across all characteristics. So we'll delve into that a little bit over the next couple of slides. Now, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics majors are the most predominant, with, again, 26% of all study abroad students having declared their major in the STEM fields. Following STEM, business and management, social sciences, foreign languages, and international studies are the most popular fields of study. Now, across all of these leading fields, we have noted growth in the 2017-18 academic year. And in particular, business grew at the fastest rate, likely due to a recognition of the increasingly interconnected marketplace. Now, while this may seem like an excellent picture, we need to consider what this means in the context of US higher education as a whole. So in blue-green, we've taken the chart from the other slide, turned it on its side, and we have the proportion of US students going abroad in the top fields of study. Now here in purple, though, we have the overall proportion of undergraduates who are actually studying in these fields. So for most of them, we see that the proportion of US students are well represented in study abroad, such as business and management, social sciences, and foreign languages. However, in the STEM fields, there continues to be an underrepresentation relative to the national proportion of undergraduate students studying at US colleges and universities. So what that means is that we see that 26% of all study abroad students are majoring in the STEM fields, but when we look at what these students are actually studying, almost 40% of them are studying in the STEM fields. So this continues to be an area for growth and focus to make sure that STEM majors, particularly in the fields of health and engineering, have opportunities to study abroad. We have also seen growth in terms of the racial and ethnic diversity of US students going abroad, which has again increased from 18% a decade ago to 30% in the 2017-18 year. However, when we compare this to the overall US higher education population, 44% of all US students identify as a racial or ethnic minority. So we clearly still have work to do to make sure that study abroad opportunities are available and accessible to students from all backgrounds. Now, an excellent example of an initiative that has provided merit opportunities for study abroad is the US Department of State's Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship Grant Program, which focuses on students with high financial need. What we have learned from the Gilman program is that programs that target students with outreach and recruitment, as well as funding opportunities, can very effectively diversify the students who go abroad. As you can see here, about 68% of Gilman participants come from underrepresented backgrounds. Another way that study abroad is diversifying is through the types of activities that students pursue. In addition to the 4-credit opportunities, which is what all of my prior slides have focused on, institutions are also offering non-credit study abroad opportunities, which provide a wealth of unique experiences for those who may not otherwise go abroad. Open Doors has documented that there are over 38,000 US students who go abroad on experiential activities that do not receive credit at their home institution. Now, we know, though, that this number is likely an undercount because only around 440 institutions were able to report these numbers to us. Now, this is really because when institutions do not grant credit, it can be difficult for them to track this information. So we know that this number is actually likely much higher. Now, in looking at this information more closely, we have found that the most popular activity among non-credit study abroad are students who are spending time volunteering or on service learning trips abroad, with about 30% reported engaged in those activities. Research and fieldwork, as well as work and internships, are the next most popular classifications. And then that large other category really captures a wealth of other opportunities, such as conferences, athletic events, and performing arts tours. Now, when looking at the specific destinations for non-credit experiences, Canada is the #1 destination, likely due to its proximity to the United States. Now, interestingly, we find that there are more US students who are going abroad on non-credit experiences to Canada than there are going on for-credit experiences. One other area to note is that 3 of the top 6 destinations here are destinations in Latin America and the Caribbean: Mexico, Dominican Republic, and Nicaragua. Now, so while Europe remains the most popular destination for all of the for-credit study abroad, we actually see that Latin America and the Caribbean is the most popular region for students going abroad on non-credit experiences. So finally, in addition to the study abroad of US students who are enrolled in the United States, we see that more and more American students are traveling abroad to pursue full degrees in other countries. So again, these are not students who are enrolled at US institutions. They are actively going to other countries to gain a full degree, such as an undergraduate or a graduate degree. Through our Project Atlas work, which Peggy will speak a little bit more about shortly, we have been able to identify that there are over 51,000 US students that are pursuing full degrees abroad. Now, these students are going to a wide array of countries, as you can see here. Now, the UK is the most popular, as well as other English-speaking countries, such as Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, what is also interesting is that there are many countries where English is not the primary language, such as France, Germany, and China. In many of these countries, we have seen that over the past couple of years, they have introduced programs in English to attract international students from all over the world. And as such, US students are availing themselves of those opportunities as well. So finally, I want to bring this back to that full comprehensive picture of study abroad that I started off this presentation with. Through our work on Open Doors, we have now been able to collect data on students who are going abroad for academic credit, going abroad on non-credit experiential activities, and also full degrees abroad, which allows us to confidently note that there are over 431,000 US students who were engaged in education abroad opportunities in 2017-18 alone. So we look forward to continuing to work with the field to capture this most comprehensive information. And with that, I will now turn it over to Peggy to speak a little bit more about global student mobility.
Thank you, Julie. Project Atlas was created about 20 years ago so that we could put in context the Open Doors data and see how it fits in the global picture of other host countries, which are also attracting large numbers of international students. As of today, we have about 30 other partner countries whose national data collection agencies are sharing with us in a timely way their data on the international students coming to their country and using the same definition as Open Doors uses and allowing us to post online and to share with you a picture that is useful to researchers, to other countries, and to planners around the world who are trying to figure out how to expand their international student population. The top global hosts for international students have changed a little bit over the past 10 years. The top bar shows in 2008 the top hosts, and there were about 3 million internationally mobile students, that is, students studying outside their own country. As of today, there are 5.3 million international students. The top host back then and now, of course, is the United States. They actually host, I think it was mentioned before, twice as many as the next 2 top hosts combined. But those next 2 top hosts have changed a little bit, particularly China as now the 3rd largest host country for international students. In 2008, the Chinese bar was not even on that list of top 10. Now they're number 3. Canada has also risen very quickly as an international host. And the other countries kind of have changed positions within the top 10, but you do see a general trend of growth in every country that is hosting students, being able to host more and more of them. This chart looks at each country of the top 10 in terms of their growth over the past 5 years. And again, the United States, by far the largest host, has shown 24% growth. Other countries who have hosted smaller numbers have seen larger percentage increases, partly because if you start with a smaller base and you add 1,000 students, it's a very large statistical percentage increase. If you add 1,000 students to the United States million number, it doesn't show as big an increase as a percentage. Let me talk a little bit now about demographic shifts that are driving this explosion of interest in study abroad around the world. In countries like India, Nigeria, Brazil, where there is a high birth rate and now a kind of a youth bulge, students who are getting out of high school and hoping to be able to pursue their international, hoping to be able to pursue higher education, there's limited home capacity. And so those students are going to be looking around the world for other opportunities. And many of their governments are helping to support that effort through scholarships, as the Brazil did, as it was mentioned before. In other countries, such as Japan, Germany, Canada, there is a declining birth rate, and as a result, an excess capacity in higher education. So those countries are going to be looking to attract new students from around the world, both to help sustain their own university programs and to attract global talent that may stay in that country and help build out the workforce. When you see these two trends converging is what helps explain the 5.3 million students internationally, and that's only likely to expand in the years ahead. So there's a multi-level response that happens in response to this tremendous demand for international education and this desire to have international students. At the global level, the UN, through its Sustainable Development Goals, has added higher education as one of those important areas to look at in addition to primary and secondary education. So the SDG 4 focuses on the importance of member states providing intensive, inclusive, and high-quality education, expanding scholarships so that more students at different economic levels can participate in higher education, and also including a focus on STEM and on vocational education. At the national level, countries that want to attract more international students are setting specific targets or goals for how many and how diverse a range of countries they want to be receiving students from. They're providing scholarships, and they're encouraging post-degree practical training or work experience. And finally, at the campus level, campuses are looking to stand out and to identify themselves as particularly welcoming. They're doing things like trying to raise their profile globally, try to raise their standings in the global rankings, working with alumni, global alumni networks, actively recruiting, and also making sure that they have expanded their services once the student has come onto campus so that the international students' needs are being met. I'm going to stop there because I know they'll have a lot of questions. These are resources, online resources you can use if you want more information about any of the topics we've discussed. Thank you.
Deputy Assistant Secretary Caroline Casagrande is going to join the panel of experts, and we'll be happy to answer questions. One of the things we always worry about in Open Doors in this press conference is, will the AV work and all the slides go? And I am so impressed with the team that's made this happen here. I had a nightmare all last night because my job is to get the first live stream questions in on this phone. And the nightmare was this recurring nightmare that I had to use a rotary phone to get the questions, and I didn't put the right password in. And I don't think I've ever used a rotary phone, so it was a really challenging nightmare. But bear with me. I think we have some live stream questions. You can see I'm still challenged. Two questions have popped up. One relates to growth in international students in the United States as it slows, and the other focuses on China. So I'm going to read the first question and ask Mirka if she can tackle that with comments from anybody else on the panel. It comes in as the growth rates of international students in the U.S. slows, what are some of the things that institutions are doing to try to stay ahead of the curve and keep their enrollment numbers up? And then for Caroline, how is the U.S. government supporting these efforts? So, Mirka.
That's a great question. Thank you to everybody who joined the live stream. So I have two kind of data points to point everyone to. In the 2019 Fall Snapshot, we actually ask institutions who have seen increases what they are doing. And I think that this is a wonderful best practice for other institutions. So we find that these institutions who grew their enrollment of students saw that what really worked were greater recruitment efforts, more active outreach to admitted students, international students, and also growing the reputation and visibility of their institution abroad. And they all cited these as the positive factors. The other thing I will note towards the end of my presentation is how much higher education institutions are leveraging different stakeholders to recruit international students. So looking to international students on campus, working with the Education USA Network, their own alumni and agents to attract international students.
Thank you for the excellent question. The federal government is taking a whole-of-government approach to international student mobility. The Departments of State, the Departments of Commerce, the Departments of Education have been meeting and considering how we can highlight the federal resources available to the higher education community. At the Department of State, we've increased our domestic outreach. We have begun actively meeting with higher education institutions throughout the country and serving as a convener for forums and workshops that show best practices so that schools and universities that have success in higher education can help instruct those other schools and universities in their areas that would like to expand their internationalization but need a little bit more expertise. You heard the Assistant Secretary say that there are 200 institutions that have 70% of our international students. Well, in a nation with 4,700 institutions, we feel that more outreach to the 4,500 institutions that don't have as many international students is one place that we can start. The Department of State also happily supports the Gilman Scholarship Program, the Critical Language Scholarship Program, the Fulbright Scholarship Program, and together we sponsor almost 7,000 international student mobility scholarships. We have also begun supporting a new international marketing campaign that will be launched next year, promoting the United States as a top study destination of choice. And of course, we are incredibly proud and work very hard to make sure international student directors from across the country are leveraging our Education USA network. It is 435 advising centers across the globe. It is free. It walks students through a 5-step process of making sure that they get to the right school for that student. We also have been promoting what we call the 2+2 model throughout the Education USA network. This allows for students to have 2 years at a community college and 2 years at a 4-year degree granting institution. We've been encouraging throughout the country schools to set up these articulation agreements with community colleges. As mentioned before, we survey, we poll, we look at why we're getting students and why we're not, and cost comes back as the #1 factor in every survey we do. So we've been working with universities to look at alternative paths of finance and different ways we can increase our student numbers while lowering that cost for our international students, and promoting these articulation agreements is one way that we have started throughout our Education USA network to attract students who perhaps are having difficulty affording a United States education.
Thank you. Now to the second question, which focuses on China. And Peggy, I was struck when I saw your slide about how close China as a destination country is to the UK. And we've never had the world's largest sending country be almost the world's a major destination. The question from Livestream is, China has become a major host nation for international students. How is this affecting the competition for globally mobile students? So focus on competition.
Yes, thank you, Alan, and thanks for the question from our live stream audience. China has indeed risen very quickly as a global host, as well as you say, the top sender to almost every country that receives students as well. But the countries that are sending the largest numbers of students to China are very different, and the kind of students they're sending to China are very different from the ones that are applying to study in the United States or the UK, for that matter. Almost all of the countries in China's top 10 incoming students are on its periphery, either Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and the Central Asia are among those countries sending to China. And many of these students who come from these countries are coming on very generous scholarships offered by the Chinese government. Other countries that are involved with the Belt and Road, China's Belt and Road effort to expand its relations with countries that have been historically part of its trade over the many centuries, and new countries around the world. Those countries also are receiving very generous scholarships, are receiving pairing of institutions, exchanges of faculty, all of the things that will help build the diplomatic and economic ties between China and its Belt and Road countries. And finally, I would say a few of the other countries in the top 10 for China, Japan and South Korea, those are largely economic and business ties. Many of those people who are coming from Japan and South Korea are sent by their companies to make sure that their Chinese language skills are first rate, to make sure that they understand fully the culture in which they're going to be doing their trade and linkages. Actually, it's the only country in the top 10 in China that doesn't fit any of those profiles is the United States, which actually is the 5th largest sender to China. But the students from the US, we're not competing with China. We still have many more US students enrolled in the United States than in China.
Peggy, thank you. Let's take questions from the audience now. Thanks again for your patience with the live stream. We're delighted to have students from GW here. If one of you would like to ask the first question, I'd be grateful. And I see a hand going up, and it is in the row there. And then I'll go to the gentleman in the rear or the lady in the rear with the blue lanyard. But raise your hand, yes, please, and the microphone's coming your way.
Hi. So in 1 year, total international exchanges from Saudi Arabia decreased by over 16%. And that seems to me like a very substantial decline. And I was wondering if someone could speak to that for any potential explanations.
All right, Mirka on the decrease in Saudi.
Sure. So the decreases we have seen in Saudi Arabia are primarily due to changes in a government scholarship program that Saudi Arabia was promoting or funding. So there has been a noticeable drop in international students coming to the United States from Saudi Arabia over the past several years due to this policy change. That being said, Saudi Arabia remains an important partner for the United States, and having Saudi students continue to experience American higher education, our values or ways of doing business is a major advantage of both our countries. But if you're seeing those decreases, it's primarily due to their government scholarship program changing. And indeed, that is something we continue to see in the international student numbers, that if you see either the start or the end of a major government scholarship program, you might see spikes like this.
How big was the Brazil when it ended?
It was the same. I think you saw that in that 10-year trend line, we saw some major dips once the Brazil Scientific Mobility Program ended, which was an undergraduate program for Brazilian students to the United States. So you saw that spike go up and then go down. So that's a very comparable trend that we saw.
Thank you. The gentleman or lady in the back with the blue lanyard.
Thank you for the conference. I'm come from CDTN. So I have one question with two parts. for the first part is because of the data from 2018, there is the biggest fact for the visa is to enroll the students. So how do you explain about this year about the decrease of the enrolling students? This is the one part, and another one is the second one is mirroring about the welcoming message of government of the U.S. government. Is there any major or some tubes to improving this kind of issue? It's like the scholar, it's like the some students complain about the visa. Thank you.
All right, both relate to an aspect of visa, and I want to start with Ed Romatowski. You might, because it's a very complicated picture. It isn't a one-for-one impact because terms of visas and length of visas change. And then I'll also ask Caroline if she'd like to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Goodman. Let me just say that as Assistant Secretary Royce mentioned in her remarks, we address this as a whole of government objective. So the consular officers in our embassies and consulates abroad are working to promote international education, just as the Education USA advisors and public affairs officers are. We place a very high value on this international exchange, but we're also required to enforce the immigration laws of the United States. If you look at the recent data, the percentage of students worldwide receiving visas is roughly 75%, and roughly 25% don't receive visas for a variety of reasons, but principally because they can't satisfy the legal requirement by proving they're going to leave the country after the completion of their studies. That's in the immigration law that was established by Congress, and that hasn't changed over the past 2 years. The percentages have stayed just about the same. Some people have focused on the fact that visa demand for student visas in China has been declining. A big reason for that has been an increase in the validity of visas issued to Chinese students, which before the end of 2014 was usually limited to 1 year. And after that time, it was increased to 5 years. So students who had to apply for a visa every year no longer need to do that. They generally receive a visa valid for their entire academic program. So that has resulted in a decline in visa demand in general, but for a good reason. And actually, the most recent numbers we have shown an increase in demand in China by about 1.6%. We also, as a matter of policy for many years, provide priority appointment access to students. Most students are applying in the summer, which just happens to be our busiest time worldwide for all other applications. But nevertheless, embassies and consulates provide priority appointments because this is a very important whole of government objective.
Thank you, Ed. Caroline?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. We have been working very hard to demystify the visa process for students. One of the suggestions we make to all students is that if they have questions, if they're wondering what's going to happen at that window, what forms are required, that they go speak to those Education USA centers. Sometimes they're in consulates and embassies, so they can actually have direct access to the people. The other times, they're sometimes in our American spaces or our binational centers throughout Central and South America. But we ask students who have those kinds of questions to please speak with those advisors directly. They can walk them through the process, make that moment at the window a little less scary. And I thank Das Romatowski for bringing up the Chinese students' visas. One of the things Assistant Secretary Royce did this summer was give a speech about how the United States welcomes Chinese students. And within that speech, Assistant Secretary Royce stated that the student visa rejection rate from China, our #1 sender of international students, has actually gone down every year for the last 5 years. those are the number of students being rejected at the window. So we really appreciate the opportunity to speak about student visas, and we've been working hard. We've been making videos as well, telling students what to expect at those windows in places like Brazil and China, where we really are looking to demystify the process.
Thank you so much. Can I take a question here? The lady with the black jacket. Then I'll go to this side of the auditorium.
Thank you. I have a question about the 2+2 program and any measures to track enrollment in that program to differentiate the undergraduate enrollment by those who are enrolled in 2+2 versus those who are enrolled in 4-year or associate's degrees.
Mirka, would that be you and then maybe Caroline, because that's also part of the U.S. government strategy?
So I think that that's a great question, and I think we can continue to look at that opportunity. I think when we track, we do go to the U.S. higher education institution that is currently hosting the international student, and unfortunately right now we don't have a way yet to kind of map student by student. That is a level of intricacy in the data that would be wonderful to have, but a little bit beyond what we can do currently, because we do ask our U.S. higher education institutions to give us their whole numbers of international students. So while we can certainly track it in terms of the community college and then the U.S. higher education institution reporting it, we won't yet be able to track individual students in the 2+2 model. But it is, of course, an aspiration, much like many others, for us to track it eventually.
So Caroline, before you joined the State Department, did you ever use the words 2+2?
No, it's got a terrible name, the program 2+2. We're open to suggestions. But certainly it's a newer initiative, and it's one we're pushing out really through our Education USA network. And on the domestic side, what we've been doing is communicating with community colleges. And I know I saw a representative from internationalization, my friend Wayne Wheeler here, from the community colleges internationalization community, to really set up these agreements. And it's going into our messaging in both videos overseas and here in the United States. Overseas, what we're saying to students is, think about the United States, think about 2 different places you want to study. You want that city experience and that country experience. You want to be a cowboy and have some New York pizza. We can make that actually possible with some articulation agreements that let you see 2 different areas of the United States. But we're also working with community colleges to build that capacity. We had them very highlighted at our Education USA Forum this summer, which if you didn't attend, we invite everyone to attend. I think it's going to be this July. Who doesn't love DC in July? Where we talk about our initiatives all over the world. And what we've done is really just increase the messaging. We're hoping to continue to track it. We think it has a huge propensity for success. One of the things that's great about community colleges is for international students, they're a smaller place. They're a place your English can get up to speed if you need a little work on your English, and it also can half that cost. So we think it's a real path to success moving forward as we continue to compete on an international global stage against all sorts of other countries interested in international students.
Since Caroline was the youngest legislator elected to the New Jersey Assembly, I think you also have to say that pizza in New Jersey is quite good. A question over here. Yes, please. The lady with the red blouse and black jacket.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Tania Hope Navas. I'm from the Ralph Bunche International Affairs Center at Howard University. And I wanted to first say thank you for highlighting Ms. Ante from Colombia and the MLK Scholars Program. I've been following that program for a long time, and it's very nice to see her and that program represented here. Speaking about Colombia, couple of things. I know on October 22nd, an MOU was signed between the U.S. Department of Education and the Colombian Ministry of Education to support and facilitate exchanges between HBCUs and Colombian universities. And given that the numbers for the data for African Americans studying abroad did not shift at all from last year, I'm wondering if there are any other agreements of that type specifically to support HBCUs, or that might be in the pipeline, and hopefully that might actually have some funding attached to it in order to do it. Thank you.
Okay, Caroline, and then Julie, if you have any perspective statistically, that would be great.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for complimenting our outstanding choice of a student ambassador this year, who spoke about the Opportunity Funds program, which I think is worthy of a moment of discussion. The Opportunity Funds program is where the United States Department of State actually helps a student who cannot afford that first step for the application process, as well as perhaps the testing. So that really allows us to get the stars from all over the world who are even having trouble with that first application fee. And it's something we've been working on, expanding our private sector fundraising for Opportunity Fund scholarships at the U.S. Department of State. You asked about Columbia specifically. We went down there in May and were incredibly impressed by the Colombian government's scholarship programs, particularly aimed at graduate students. They have enormous capacity through their Culfuturo and ECTEX programming to increase their graduate student study here in the United States. And so the embassy, who have been incredible partners, went and forward with those two groups and signed that agreement. We are always looking to increase our HBSC students and scholarships. And so we're working through that, but Columbia is in a particularly good place right now for increasing those scholarship funds. And we are working to increase our scholarship funds through all sorts of different fundraising. One of the things the Assistant Secretary has done in the past year is really encourage embassies and ambassadors to take a whole of mission approach to international student mobility. And I think the results in Colombia are something that you can see from her leadership and encouragement on the matter.
Thank you. Julia, any perspective on the numbers?
Certainly, and I think that one thing, again, that's important to recognize about the numbers for this year is that they are from the 2017-18 academic year, and because of that time lag, we may not be quite seeing that information show up in the data yet. So I would say in the next couple of years to be looking at that more closely.
So stay tuned for next year's Open Doors. We're just about at the end of our period together. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for people on the panel and the audience to mix with each other. As we leave, I want to thank the U.S. Institute of Peace again for hosting us, and the members of the press and all of you here that represent your universities as senior internationalization officers, at major associations. You were always interested in this data, and I think together all of us are trying to use it to make the best case we can for the power of internationalization and education both at home and abroad. Thank you for joining us.